Hello, Dr. Shenoy. It's great to have you on the Digital Excellence Pharma Academy. I want to congratulate you because you're the first medical doctor to come on this Digital Excellence Pharma Academy. But I think you've had a very interesting, what should I say,
Life.
life, yeah, as a clinician and working with some of the hospitals that are like the billboards of Indian healthcare, with Fortis, with Gleneagles, and with Apollo. So tell us a little bit about your journey and now as an entrepreneur. So our participants would like to know a little bit about you.
Well, I'll keep it very brief. Thank you so much, Mr. Soans, for inviting me to your platform. I think it's a incredible place to be in. Uh, uh, God has been good. I have been able to see healthcare industry from different angles. So, as a clinician, I was in Irvine Hospital in Maulana Azad Medical College. I'm a critical care specialist and an anesthesiologist.
Wow.
I headed emergency. I worked there, for different kinds of portfolios. But then I started plateauing. I started getting bored. So I said, "What's next?" So then the world of organization development, leadership development, and finance, and management opened up.
Okay.
It had nothing to do with healthcare. So I took my certifications. I went out and learned. I came back. It was parallel, and then I realized that healthcare industry in those days was not open to such interventions. Even today, they're a little reticent. So I worked outside healthcare with companies like ITC, Tata Motors, as a consultant, basically on strategy, on leadership development. I then came back to healthcare and worked with Fortis for a brief while as their medical director, because they were looking at somebody who understands business, finance, and clinical.
Right.
That was a short stint, and then I moved on to Apollo.
Okay.
When I left Apollo, I was the group CEO. I was responsible for gutting Apollo's operations and making them seriously relevant for the current times.
Right.
So we use technology big time there.
Right.
And then I worked for some time with Global Gleneagles as one of the directors of the company.
Right.
After which, I have been a consultant. I advise investment in healthcare. I work with private equity funds to evaluate hospitals and businesses. I also have my own company which does complete business transformation for hospitals. So complete right from clinical services, finance, everything.
Right.
So that's a bit of my background. As far as tech is concerned, it's been an interesting journey. I bought my first computer way back when you used to have something called a 386. I don't know whether you heard of the machine.
Yes.
And we used to have Windows, where you had some diskettes and you had to keep putting them in.
Right.
So I started my fascination with technology then. I wrote the vision document so I was involved with the Y2K. I don't know whether you're aware of the Y2K thing that used to happen.
Yeah.
I was part of Delhi government's response for that. Nothing happened. And then I wrote the vision document as part of the team which wrote the vision document for computerization of Delhi government services. It was a long time ago. After that, it's been a journey with different management systems and all that, trying to understand, building platforms which add value to both the patient and the physician. So that's where I'm coming from. Very happy to be here.
Great. I think we have selected the right person. I didn't know you were in critical care and anesthesiology before venturing out as an entrepreneur. But considering that most media channels during this COVID season had cardiologists talking about COVID, I think we should have one more session with you on COVID care sometime later. So it's great to have you, Doctor. It's a fascinating journey that you made from being a clinician to a finance and leadership development, organization development, and then to being an entrepreneur to help play a vital role in the special times, at least the COVID times. So I was really, what caught my attention a few days back was a New York Times report which said that telemedicine has grown to a couple of $1 billion business. In the last couple of months, as compared to just 60 million for the same period last year. So any such data or information that you have on how telemedicine is shaping in India?
So I think there was a study that was being used by FICI, and there were some which said that the telemedicine has leapfrogged by about 350% in the last few weeks. The usage has gone up. There were some numbers around that. So I think overall, then I was reading a report a few days ago where that was, I think, an American report where they were saying that about uh, how many older people have started accepting telemedicine, and I was quite surprised to see that 43% of them are actually looking at not just consults but actually monitoring their health. So that is something that people don't have enough appreciation of. I was also talking to somebody in NHS in England, and I think suddenly NHS has discovered that this could be one way to reduce cost. You see, there are so many things that come with telemedicine, so many expectations. So yes, I see a great interest in telemedicine. There has been a big behavioral change. Probably it's been a fabulous looking back for just the 3 months and what's happened. You see, if I look at India, I come back from an era where there was those clunky telemedicine platforms. When I was heading Apollo, we used to have Apollo telemedicine. Apollo has always been the forefront, and there was this satellite business. In Fortis also, the doctor had to come from the clinic, sit there. It used to be a very painful process for the doctor to see the reports and have a consult and all. Most of them refused to come. So the physician compliance was very poor. And I still remember Dr. Ganpati, who used to head telemedicine, used to get very frustrated. So basically, it was a tech which was clunky. And because of the clunkiness of the technology, the physician acceptance was poor. And because the physician acceptance was poor, the whole system went into disrepute. I remember governments using this big time, trying to use it, but physicians were not available. So one thing that has happened is that the patient acceptance has gone up. People are saying, wow, this is great. I can sit at home and talk to a doctor. And the follow-up piece is very, very important. I'll elaborate on that. So yes, because patients are accepting it, physicians are also saying, wow, this is a great place to be. Great. So I think, yes, there's a great behavioral change, and I think it's going to continue to move.
Yeah, so, I remember telemedicine way back in the 90s. I mean, people say it's a 100-year-old technology because you are using telephone and giving any medical advice constitutes telemedicine. But I clearly remember going to this railway hospital in Baikala, and there was a doctor by name Dr. R.B. Pandit. I remember it so well even now because he had a beautiful quote on his wall, with the picture, with the cartoon that's saying, if two people, are agreeing all the time, then one of them is unnecessary.
Good. But it's very important.
But if the two people are arguing all the time, then both of them are unnecessary. So I remember meeting him, and I was from pharma. Not many pharma people visited railway doctors. I just went out of curiosity, and he was also very fascinated. And he explained the whole thing about telemedicine to me. This was in the early 90s. That I think railways was a pioneer in use of telemedicine because they have all these stations and people coming and having some kind of an emergency. So he said we use it very widely, both for our staff as well as for the passengers when there is a medical emergency. So telemedicine is quite a old technology, but as you said, it was clunky. And I think what was critical for India was the MCI giving the green light to use telemedicine. So can you tell us a little bit more about how the whole thing happened and what is really the MCI guideline done for telemedicine?
So I think MCI is not that they were not looking at telemedicine. What I understood from some of my my friends or colleagues who are part of the MCI. So they said they've been looking at it, but COVID just accelerated the whole thing. So they had to come up and create those guidelines and publish them. Now what they have very clearly stated is those guidelines are WIP. They are work in progress. So they will continue to iterate as feedback comes in. So that is something that I want to really tell all the doctors out there, that this is not set in stone. This is a first cut, and I think it's a pretty decent cut that they have done. They have tried to go into a lot of detail. They have tried to bring in all the nuances of telemedicine to the extent that they could. So what they have actually said is, one, they made it very clear that telemedicine is now legal. So there was a lot of confusion regarding telemedicine. Can you actually prescribe without
Yeah.
seeing the patient?
Yeah.
And there were some court judgments which went against this. So now it's very clear that you can. That's one thing. But at the same time, so that has been very good, very good for us as a community of doctors and hospitals, that we have clarity. However, they have also made it very clear how to do it, and which is something which is I think needs to be reiterated again and again with my colleagues. There are four major areas I think that I would like to, that form the core of the MCI guidelines, which is as far as safety is concerned. So primarily, as I always say, telemedicine is the practice. So I'll talk about that like a while. The patient's interest has to be looked after and protected. At the same time, the physician's interest is also important. So telemedicine guidelines have tried to balance both.
Right.
This is a very important part. Now, in this context, I would like to say that there are four things that I said which are important. One is, I think they've said that the patient must know who are they consulting with. So the doctors must be identified. They must be able to tell that, this is a doctor that I will be consulting with. The second thing is, the patient also must be identifiable. So this is one big piece that I would say the doctors should understand, that the platform, whatever they are using, has this in the system. The second thing is consent. Now, there are two parts of consent. One is an implied consent, one is an express consent. When you say implied consent, when a patient generates a telemedicine consult, then it is assumed that there is going to be an implied consent. It is the same thing as somebody walking into my OPD. There is no consent taken because it's an implied consent.
Implied consent, yeah.
But in case the doctor or some other party is initiating it, then it's express consent. So then you need to take consent. And you need to take consent and record it. This is very clear. I have a small suggestion to my colleagues here. My suggestion is record consent every material, whether it's a patient, initiating it, or whether it is a doctor or whatever. And ultimately, consent is a very critical part of everything, and you must record it properly. The patient must be told that there are limitations to a teleconsult, which is very important, which is that you will not be physically examined. The advice will be given on the basis of the reports and your previous prescription and your current condition and whatever I can tell. The third piece is prescription. Now, prescriptions have to be legal. There is no way you can write an illegal prescription. Now, there are laws that talk about what a legal prescription is, which is under the Drugs Act, and then of course the MCI guidelines. So if the prescription has to have the doctor's name, their qualifications, their contact numbers, the patient should be identified, signature should be there, provisional diagnosis is important, and what you can write there is also been to some extent defined in the MCI guidelines. So prescription is critical.
Right.
And the last but not the least is MCI has made it very clear you must maintain all the records, which means the record keeping is even more stringent than you would do in a physical consult. So all the records of the logs, the x-rays, the blood test reports, your previous prescriptions, the prescription that you wrote, everything should be available to you, and when asked for should be producible in a court of law. So these are four things that have come up which have been very clearly defined by the MCI. MCI has not prescribed what to use and what not to use, but they've said this is critical.
Right. So you would say that these are the four or some of the key elements of telemedicine.
Absolutely. And now again, telemedicine is a very broad term.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people believe telemedicine and teleconsultation is almost synonymous. It is not so.
True.
Teleconsultation is just one part of the whole umbrella of telemedicine.
Right.
It's something that I would like to talk about later in this time.
Sure.
So that's what the MCI has done. It's it's clarified, it's legal, so you're protected. Number two, it's also told you how to practice. Now, if doctors continue to violate, now they can be in trouble because MCI has said it in black and white. This is how you should do, and if you don't do it, then there's no defense.
Right.
So that's what I would like to say.
Right. So that's very interesting that you made this. That we tend to think that teleconsult equals telemedicine. Just like our friends in pharma sometimes think a couple of webinars is digital adoption. So digital is much bigger,
Yeah.
and webinar is probably one of the ways, channels, or in which through which you can interact or engage the doctor. So that's a good distinction. So since this is something new, not only for maybe for the some of the doctors, they would have done parts of it, but what about the patient, Dr. Shenoy? It's just how can telemedicine, including teleconsult, be made patient friendly, so that he doesn't feel, I mean, we are all used to the touch and feel factor, although in today's time, I think for the last 4 months, everything has been in the virtual world. But still, I would say that for somebody who's in pain or somebody who's in distress, what are the ways in which telemedicine can be made more user friendly or patient friendly?
So one thing I like to say is that use cases are very, very important part of good telemedicine practice. If we get time, we will talk about these use cases in more detail. So when you talk about the patient, there was this whole concept that patients would be very, would not be very happy if the doctor doesn't touch them, doesn't take the pulse, doesn't auscultate, doesn't palpate. Those are things that every patient expects. And therefore, there was this whole conversation around patient acceptance. However, thanks to COVID, I think people have just accepted it big time.
Right.
So I think this reluctance of doctors or the naysayers saying that no, patients need that touch, I think is to some extent mitigated.
Okay.
However, now we look at the use case. If I'm coming for look at follow-up cases. For example, one of the biggest things that we face when we are doing chronic disease management or non-communicable disease management is patients really don't come for follow-ups. I'm a diabetologist. I tell the patient, please come for a quarterly visit. The patient doesn't come. Suddenly, after 2 years, he'll suddenly come in and say, hi, doc, do you remember me? And you're wondering, who's this guy? What is he saying? And you can't even say, I don't remember you, because he'll get offended. The fact is, that's the reality of practice, right?
Right.
So why wouldn't they come? Because probably it's not about the money itself, but it's probably inconvenience. I have to go all the way there, talk to the doctor, spend half my day, take leave, whatever it is. It's not really worth it. Now I can sit there, and sometimes, I used to come with my report. The doctor would look at the report, and he will say, all well? Yeah, all well. Then he would simply write 3 alphabets, CST. Patient doing well, continue same treatment, that's it. So I spend half a day coming to the clinic or hospital. I sit in a line outside, I pay whatever money I have to pay, and all it takes is a minute. So can I get this done at home?
Yes.
Of course, yes. So when you look at the different use cases, now I'm having pain abdomen and I am vomiting and I have got loose motions, or I'm having pain chest. Is that the time when I would actually go on and try to log in and search for a doctor and get a consult?
Right.
Absolutely no. You should go to the hospital.
Right.
So telemedicine or teleconsult is not a panacea for all your problems.
Right.
There are use cases, and those use cases are very well defined.
Right.
And I think that's where I think the focus should be.
Okay. So that's a very good point that you have made to people who think that everything will be in the virtual world, that you get a heart attack and then you get you make a teleconsult or telemedicine contact. That's not the ideal point. But I think, as you said, that for repeat, as they would say in the West, a refill of their prescriptions. And also from the monitoring perspective, I think there are parts of telemedicine that could be automated, which ensure that both the doctor and the patient get the kind of information saying that your visit is due, and to the doctor, this is time for you to check up on this patient. So there are a lot of things that can be automated, and this can be really made into, as you said, it's real medical practice, or even improve certain aspect of medical practice, which is not happening today. Compliance is definitely a major issue, both from the patient, aggravating his situation and coming in for medical care only when probably his blood sugar levels or have really shot up, or his blood pressure has really shot up, and he's not been taking medications when you go back to it. So I think so broadly I would say that telemedicine is just one more aspect of digitalization of healthcare, which really is going to improve both for the doctor and for the patient. Any comments on that, doctor?
Yes, definitely. So what you have now brought in is the whole umbrella of telemedicine, right? And I would like to spend some time
Sure.
on answering this question of yours, because this is very important. So telemedicine basically is, as I said, I've been saying this, it's a serious medical practice. It's not about WhatsApp messages and calling on the phone and all that. It's not that. Please don't, compare it with all that. It is not. If you look at what is happening in the world today, is that we are facing, let's leave apart COVID-19, but the fact is that we are facing an epidemic of non-communicable diseases.
Right.
And non-communicable diseases don't get cured per se.
Right.
So the purpose of managing a non-communicable disease is different from cure. So you manage a non-communicable disease, you ensure that complications don't happen, and in case they are going to, or they start to happen, you catch them early and treat them, so the patient remains healthy. Now that is what we are focusing on. Now in this whole thing, this action is not happening in the doctor's clinic or in the hospital. A lot of this action is happening in the patient's home.
Right.
And therefore, how do you ensure that the patient is supported in all these activities? It cannot be, because physically you cannot go there. So it has to be by technology. Now, what are the components that can come in? What is it that we can do for patients for NCD management apart from teleconsults? So one big area that Anup you brought in was education.
Right.
So patients need to be educated. So, okay, before I go there, one of the biggest things that the whole world, as doctors we face is compliance, or what activists say, should not use the word compliance, but you should actually use the word adherence. So
Right.
patients do not comply or adhere to medical instructions.
Right.
Patients find it difficult to change their lifestyles, because changing lifestyle is not easy. It's very easy to say, oh, you must go for a walk for 30 minutes. You must not have, carbs, this, that, go for complex carbohydrates, don't eat sugar, blah, blah, blah. It looks very simple, but actually it doesn't happen unless my lifestyle changes, right? So you go to a dietitian, they say that, if you're going to lose weight, you should not eat anything after 8 p.m. The guy says, man, I come back home at 9 o'clock. So how does it work for me?
Right.
So how does telemedicine help? So it helps you to educate the patients about their disease. Now this education, people can say you can get it on the net. Well, first of all, net or internet education is not necessarily accurate. Number two, the patient doesn't know whether this applies to them or not. See, every clinician gets all kinds of calls. I even now get calls from patients, once in a while saying they read this on the net. What do they think they should do? So, second thing that people want is validation. Is this relevant for me?
Right.
This internet education.
Right.
Number three, what should I do about it? Is it actionable? So, net education, when you say education or you give them a pamphlet, is not good enough. You need to ensure that the education that they get is personalized.
Right.
So I am a diabetic, and I also have nephropathy. I need to be on a different kind of education than just being a pure diabetic. Or if I'm diabetic with insulin, if I'm diabetic with, let's say, cardiomyopathy. So, everybody has different ways of, different nuances of getting just education. Second part is, after getting education, is instructions. Now,
Right.
Third thing that comes in is reminders. Number four, in part of this, is long-term education, supporting your behavioral change. So imagine a patient's journey. I always keep telling people that, when you are talking about marketing, I kept telling doctors and patient hospitals, look, marketing is not about selling only. Marketing is about adding value to a patient on each part of this journey. So let's look at a patient. Before they come to the doctor or the hospital, let's say they're coming for surgery. They started for surgery. I'm supposed to go for my, let's say my lab colleague tomorrow. I need to stop aspirin 10 days before.
Right.
So sometimes I forget, and then on the day of surgery, I find that, oh, I've still been taking aspirin. Anesthetist gets upset, surgeon gets upset, the patient is postponed, or you take a risk. So is it possible that day minus 10, a message goes to the patient saying, stop aspirin, stop, and then, smoking,
Right.
or night before surgery, have a bath. People have lots of questions. You'll be surprised at the kind of questions they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, can I wear my glasses? Should I wear contacts? Can I wear makeup? Why should I remove, my nail polish?
Okay.
Um, is some of them will come with a cup of tea in the morning saying, oh, tea is not breakfast. So I
Right.
came empty stomach.
Right.
So this education business is very critical.
Right.
Once they leave the hospital, for whatever reason, I mean, after surgery, after procedure, they again have a list of questions. Can I eat today? If possible, what should I eat? Can I climb a flight of stairs? Can I have a bath? How do I look after my wound? Um, you know, so many questions. Just imagine, having a protocol which says day plus one, okay, you can now walk. Day plus two, you can, walk up you climb a flight of stairs. Day plus five, you can now take a bath. I don't know, whatever your
Right.
protocol is.
Right.
Imagine that is telemedicine, and imagine that going to the patient, then sending them a reminder, please take your meds, don't forget it. Then sending them a reminder saying, in case you have these problems, contact me. So, a list of complications. If, let's say you're bleeding or you're vomiting or, you have pain or something, please call me.
Right.
Now, the way doctors do it is through a pamphlet. Now, nobody reads that thing. It's text. It's medically in a text. Nobody reads it. Getting it on a mobile phone, personalized to me, maybe with some visual in it, makes it so much more interesting.
Right. Right. So,
So that is one part. Sorry, this
yeah,
is a longish thing. And then, there's a big part of which is called monitoring. So I want to monitor the patient's health. This was about education and tracking and things like that. I want to monitor them. The monitoring could be real time by putting an ICU grade monitor at home or a device at home, or
right.
it could be something very simple like, taking your weight every day.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Heart failure. Patient having heart failure. Statistics say that at least they have 4 episodes of hospitalization in a year once they have heart failure. Now, can that be prevented? So just tracking weight every day sensitively can actually prevent it and catch it in time. So if you gain, let's say, 3 kgs in the last 2 days, that means there's water retention happening. Probably I'll go into an acute episode of heart failure. And therefore, if you are talking to a doctor, consult the doctor over video, say, I just gained 3 kg, or an alert comes in and in your dashboard, and the doctor says, okay, I think you might go, please increase your Lasix to, from 40 milligrams to 60 milligrams or 80 milligrams, and, for all you know, you might just get better and not need to go to the hospital.
Right.
So these are powerful methods by which we add value to a patient's clinical outcomes, which is critical. So in this whole concept now, teleconsult becomes just very small piece.
Oh, yeah. So great. So from adherence to education, it looks to me that, as you rightly said, nobody likes, most doctors don't like a Google savvy patient who comes with Google information. In fact, I have seen doctors putting out on the posters saying that if you have already consulted Google, then you can look for another place,
Or you get charged double.
whatever. So I think, this is an ideal way where he can actually personalize his treatment. Therefore, his engagement level goes up with the patient, and therefore the experience for the patient is a much better one. And that leads to a natural outcome is that he's unlikely to change the doctor, because today attrition, I say, just affects everything. It affects companies in terms of employees. It affects the patient is also, there's a level of attrition. So Actually, this is a system that can keep the engagement, especially when it comes to NCDs, where it's a lifelong management rather than as you said, curing it. I think it's this technology has COVID has actually worked like a accelerator, so that this technology of adherence and education is very important, because unless the patient is educated, I think adherence, is not up to the mark, because they really don't know the consequence of non-adherence. I think, and plus the little reminders that you said, that on the surgery day, this you have to do this, and post-surgery day, maybe depending on the patient's, recovery level, he can recommend a appropriate activity that he can take. So that's really excellent points for that, doctor. Now coming to the most interesting point, I think, in many ways, technology initially comes, like a game, or a mobile phone that all of us were fancying, but eventually it disrupts the very business models, and that's, I think, where it really makes an impact. Like, I lived in Bombay for many years, Mumbai now, and getting a cab or an auto was, a very difficult proposition, and you have to ask that couple of people, and then again you don't know if he is assessing you are from Bangalore, so by the way you speak Hindi, he makes out, and then he takes you for a ride, or he, whatever. So when this technology was adapted by Uber, or Ola, it just changed the dynamic. So when I go to the airport now, that's the last worry that I have, is that, will I get a cab that will take me to my destination, and I even know the rates in advance. So in terms of telemedicine, one of the key challenges that the doctor has is that I'm told that once a patient consults him for anything particular, then there are 8 follow-up calls to, like you said, should I do my nail polish? Should I have a cup of tea? Those kind of queries, which are difficult to monetize. So what about the monetization part, doctor? Is that how can the doctor have a confidence that this new digital, telemedicine or whatever, how can it help him, so that he doesn't have an adverse impact on his revenues or income?
Interesting question you asked. Thank you so much. We have been providing telemedicine services in rural areas and everywhere else, and this whole patient engagement system that you talked about. So let me give you some examples. So one of the most powerful things that comes, when you are doing pure play marketing, is that word of mouth marketing. Nothing beats word of mouth marketing. So if you're doing healthcare marketing, one big part is word of mouth marketing. The other big part is patient reviews, or whatever, patient testimonials. They work. And why? Because they are supposed to create that faith and trust. Because healthcare marketing, as with any other marketing, is to develop trust. Now, when the doctors have limited time, right? They only have 8 to 10 or 12 hours to spend with the patients. I'm just saying 12 hours, that's a lot of time, but let's assume that you're a very busy doctor. How much time can you give to each patient individually, and then their questions, and so many things that people want to ask or want to be engaged with. But you said rightly, if I'm able to create this powerful engagement with the patient using a telemedicine solution, and this whole telemedicine piece, I actually build my practice, because I will get more patients. Why? Because this patient is going to tell 20 others, wow, my doctor sends me so many things. He's so much concerned about me. He sends me reminders, he sends me education, he sends me in very nice ways. He's constantly in touch with me, he actually cares for me. Now that itself is a big, powerful, let's say, differentiator between you and the rest of the doctors. That's right. One big piece. The second thing is the convenience. I can actually book a teleconsult and talk to a doctor, whenever I want to. If I need to, I don't have to come all the way to the hospital. And some of these patients come from outside town. So what better? So actually, it's a very powerful tool to create what we don't understand in healthcare is lifetime value of a patient. So if I ask a doctor or any even hospital management marketing people, what's the lifetime value of a patient for you? Most of them have no clue. They've never calculated. So I want to leave this behind in this conversation with your audience, saying Ladies and gentlemen, what's the lifetime value of a patient for you? Calculate it and let me know. And how do you calculate it? Believe me, it's one of the most powerful things that you will think of. The other thing that I'm talking hardcore, because you talked about marketing, hardcore marketing, right? The second thing is, what's the patient acquisition cost? How many of us are tracking it in hospitals or in, as doctors or practitioners? You have no clue. And I switch this back to the pharma companies. So when I look at pharma, I'm sure you track all this, right?
Yes.
But how many of you have any solution for for extracting lifetime value of a patient?
Nothing, really.
So your patient acquisition cost, I'm sure you definitely are tracking, right?
Yeah.
Is there any method of reducing it? What are you thinking about that? Number two, how do you ensure that you get LTV? And your LTV will come only by ensuring that the patient buys your medicine. I'm being very hardcore, a hardcore sales guy here, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that the patient buys your meds? Make sure one of the things is that, of course, affordability, the number two, accessibility, blood, at the end of the day, it is creating a relationship. It is adding value to the patient. Now, whether you can do it directly or whether you do it through the doctor, ultimately, if all of us understand that there is only one pair, and that is the patient, and if we continue to add value to them, you will also get value back. So I think somewhere pharma also needs to understand that, if you really want to build the next level of pharma sales, telemedicine could be a very powerful tool. But telemedicine is not teleconsult.
Right.
That's all I wanted to say on this. Maybe there could be other questions you would like to ask.
Great. No, this has been a revelation for me. I mean, the way you have talked as a clinician and as a hospital administration and lifetime value. My friend Salil Kalyanpur always talks about this. That's something that pharma never does. They get one prescription and the rep is excited, everybody is excited, and But if you look at a diabetic patient or a hypertensive patient, most of them are diagnosed with this illness in their productive years, anywhere from 30 to 40. So they going by today's lifespan, they live to 70 plus years. So 30 years of a patient. It's almost like a subscription model that you can have for we get our daily newspaper, and I don't know what happened to my newspaper guy some time back, and he was going on putting the newspaper, and I thought maybe he's giving me a free this thing because and then after 3 years he gives me a bill for 10,000. I'm in for a shock.
Lifetime value forever.
So this is the real thing about lifetime value. So in 3 years, I think he realized what was my value to him, and then he says, okay, we'll work it out so that you just pay 1/3 of it, but you please continue taking the newspapers and magazines from me. So I think this is something really, I'm really fascinated that a clinician had to, a medical doctor had to point this out to pharma, because they generally assume that they know everything. But I have always held it that doctors are very good business people, because at the end of the day, every day I think they do how was this day, if not actually doing a P&L, but in a rough aggregation they do and say, was it a good day, or not a good day.
So I forgot to tell you, for 2 years, I had gone, 3 years, I had set up my own small rural center in a place called Narkanda 30 years ago.
Okay.
I sold off everything and started my own center there. And what you said just now, it reminded me of my time there. Every day in the evening, I would take out, okay, how many patients did we see? How many tests did we do? How many consultation? How much money did I make? And at that time, I had, I had $10,000 to pay for the rental and another $5,000 for the the loan EMI for the machines and all. So every day I used to say, have I made enough money?
Right.
Right. But another thing that you brought in about pharma, because we talked about pharma, is that pharma works in silos. So I think we need to look. So within a company, when I talk to pharma, some of them, they say that, okay, so we have brand managers and marketing managers who are disease specific, right? So this is handling diabetes, or I don't know what you call it. There's a technical term for it. Yeah. But telemedicine transcends. So a patient of diabetes will also require diabetes, nephrology, cardiomyopathy, goes for transplant. So all of them get, so when you look at using telemedicine or leveraging it for building sales for pharma, I think you have to transcend across different verticals.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because patient is not just a cardiac patient. It's
Right.
something that I also struggle with doctors at times,
Yes.
because a cardiologist wants a specific kind of telemedicine solution, and that will not work for an eye guy. So I was talking to NHS Scotland. They wanted an eye solution. I said, look, boss, I mean, we can create an eye solution for you, but at the end of the day, patients they've got more, they have a body apart from eyes.
Yes.
So then what happens? So I think we have to evolve this whole thinking regarding telemedicine. Now, there is a lot that we can talk about business models here.
Sure. I mean, it's very interesting. I'm definitely going to call you for more questions because you seem to have an intrinsic understanding. From the time you mentioned the lifetime value, and now the pharma operates in silos. You're spot on. And I think one of the key things that pharma has to undergo a change is that digital just doesn't allow you to have silos. If you're going to adapt digital and still work in silos, I think it doesn't make any sense, because the data has to flow from the different arms that like the medical department or even the supply chain, as to what's really happening in real time. So that's the advantage of digital. So really look forward to having a few more sessions with you.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, please go ahead, Doctor.
No. What I was saying was that when you ask the question about adoption adoption of telemedicine in real life, what I'm trying to say there is that it's the business models that will drive this change.
Right.
And when I say business model, I'm saying that someone somewhere is paying for it, and if they are not getting enough value out of it, then they will not pay for it. Right. So let's look at what happened in COVID. So it's important, I think, for us to understand what happened in COVID. So suddenly all doctors were asked to close their clinics, hospitals were closed, right? No patients coming in, no consultation, no revenue, zero. Then they suddenly discovered telemedicine. Oh my gosh, this is something that can really, it's a magic wand. It will suddenly, change my practice completely. So there's a big mad rush for telemedicine. Pharma companies decided, oh, this is a bandwagon that we can ride and create relationships with doctors. So left, right, and center, people were pulverized. Doctors were pulverized with telemedicine solutions. Nobody had a clue. People were making telemedicine solutions overnight with WhatsApp and things like that. No idea about legality, nothing. Then suddenly they realized, oh my, this doesn't really help, because there's no new patient that is going to come. You have to market.
Right.
Right. So they thought that if I am on telemedicine, new patients will start pouring in. Suddenly there was a dip in the enthusiasm.
Okay.
Now, the dip in the enthusiasm is because we have not really understood that telemedicine is not teleconsult.
Right.
And telemedicine, as I said, if you look at the stakeholders in the healthcare, in this little environment, you have the doctor and you have the patient. That's the primary stakeholders. So, am I adding value to the doctor? How can I add value to the doctor by giving telemedicine? Is by increasing his practice, ensuring that he gets more consults, he gets more patients, his patients have better clinical outcomes, and he has a very powerful relationship with his patient. That's my value proposition for a doctor. For a patient, my main interest is accessing a doctor when I want to, which is something to do with rural health also. Maybe you can ask that question later. Number two, it should be affordable. I should reduce my cost. And number three, most importantly, I should stay healthy. So my clinical outcomes are important. That's the patient interest. Is telemedicine adding value there? Absolutely. How do you do it is a separate issue. But then there are fringe players, right? Or let's say support players, secondary players. Secondary player number one is a hospital. What's in it for the hospital? So the hospital, one is, of course, they have their own nuances that, patients should come to the hospital and not to the doctor. That's their own internal stuff. But at the end of the day, the hospital's interest is almost the same as the doctor's, that, patients should feel good. They should feel they should be convenient for them, etc., etc. Then the other piece is pharma. What's in it for pharma? So pharma is looking for, as I said, lifetime value of a patient. So how do they get this out of telemedicine? So if they are able to create this whole system of education, engagement, tracking, monitoring on behalf of doctors or hospitals, or on behalf of the patients directly, and I don't know about the B2B or B2B2C or B2C, that is something that we can discuss. But the principle is, pharma can powerfully use this model to actually add value to the patient. And of course, they are doing it for specific kind of diseases, NCDs, but it's too little and too restricted, in my opinion.
Right.
And there's another big industry which actually gains out of it, which is insurance.
Right.
Insurance works only on one thing: my claim ratios, right? So my claim ratios need to be as less as possible. And for me to reduce claim ratios is to ensure that my patients or the insured should actually be not be going to hospital, not fall sick. So it's in their interest to ensure that patients stay healthy.
Right.
What better method
Yeah.
than to monitor, maintain, educate, and support their healthy lifestyles? So we have to start thinking out of the box. It's not teleconsult alone.
Right.
Can you think of a model where pharma says, okay, I'm going to help patients, and then that pharma, somebody has to drive it across pharma within the company? And is it possible for pharma to talk with insurance? They have a similar kind of interest,
right,
and create a bigger piece. In all this, technology.
Right.
Now the tech companies have got no stake in healthcare delivery, although they claim to be there.
Right.
Unfortunately, what has happened in the US for telemedicine is that instead of healthcare driving telemedicine adoption, technology tried to drive it.
Right.
And technology is definitely not going to help drive this telemedicine at all. It will have to be healthcare. Technology for me is just a tool. It's like a stethoscope. It's like a laparoscope. The laparoscope doesn't tell me as a surgeon how to operate. So technology should actually adapt to what is happening in the healthcare and then make it easy for people to use telemedicine.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. I think you are given a kind of a 360-degree view of what telemedicine is, and I think you have gone even beyond saying that it's serious medical practice. I think it is serious business management as well, because because it is helping the doctor to manage his patients better. If he manages patient better, if there's a greater amount of patient satisfaction, there's not only retention, but as you said, the most important way medical practice gains new patients is by word of mouth. And he talks about it, maybe he tweets about it, maybe he posts it on social media and says, hey, I found a great doctor. Because I see that in my local community, I'm on a separate page, Facebook page, and I often see posts that I'm having this ailment. Anybody knows who's a good doctor in this space? So doctors are not aware of this, the external things that's driving their business. That patient-initiated steps are there, and I think digital and telemedicine, which is a part of it, can be a very powerful tool for doctors to benefit from this. And the other very important thing you mentioned is that I think the person who really wants you to stay well now is the insurance company.
Always.
And so I think they have a huge stake, and pharma needs to work on creating an ecosystem. That's what Salim Put, our digital specialist, always says, is that it's about creating an ecosystem and the ability to form uncommon partnerships. In the traditional sense, we may not look at that, but because technology is enabling you to do that, I think it makes a lot of sense at least to have a discussion with these different stakeholders like insurance companies, is to see what is it that they are looking for, and everything centered around the benefit of the patient. Because if the patient stays healthy, he adheres to the treatment, pharma benefits, the doctor benefits, the insurance company benefits. So it's a great learning, doctor. I'll quickly take one of our audience questions, doctor. There is Jagajeevan Kulkarni, who's asking us that what is the biggest question in my mind is that telemedicine is only limited to metro or bigger city. What about rural India? Still, there's a lot more people who are not technology friendly. I think you already touched in a way. It would be great if you can amplify on that.
Definitely. I think so. As a company, we were running 20-25 rural centers, and I have had interactions with other people who have run to rural centers. I think telemedicine can be a huge game changer as far as rural India is concerned. How and why, I'll tell you. So one thing that we think is that our rural people are not tech savvy. Believe me, they are. They are all on Facebook. They are all on WhatsApp.
Right.
So that's one. Number two, people believe that they are not smart enough to understand, this whole telemedicine business. Believe me, they are smarter than you and I. Number two, because I've seen it. Number three, their acceptance is very high. Now, the only problem that happens is that the net speed is limited. Number one. Yeah. Number two, they still want to come to a place where they can actually have a physical somebody to help them set it all up.
Right.
So yes, imagine a rural center, imagine a general practitioner, imagine a doctor sitting in a small town, and they have a clinic, and they say, today I can give you cardiology referrals from here, and I can connect you to cardiologists in, let's say, Chennai or Delhi or whatever. I have a connect there. And if the patients come to them, they help them, with their reports, they upload them, the doctor has a consult, takes out a printout, gives it to them. And the doctor here actually does even the physical examination. So that is something that is so powerful that can be used for rural health. Second is, in case there is no doctor, you can train ashas to do this, right? You can have devices which can do it. So this is one part as far as rural is concerned. It's now a matter of having the will and the money to actually do it.
Right.
I mean, we have done it. Now it's a matter of how to do it. And, somebody has to go there and say, okay, let me start 50 centers, 100 centers. We even have business models around it. The second piece that I would like to talk about is something that is really, really interesting. There is this company which does ECGs, right?
Right.
So what they did is, you can do fancy stuff with ECG and you can do some really basic stuff. So they have this guy on a motorcycle who takes a ECG machine and he goes to a village and then he does, some $50 or something or $25 he does ECGs. And then you upload these ECGs and there is a cardiologist sitting at the back end and he looks at all the ECGs and says, okay, these ones are, having some, findings. Can you ask the patient to come to the hospital? Helps the hospital to get patients. And there's a chap with ECG on a bike. Can you imagine this? It's working. It does very well. You can do the same thing with so many other kinds of diseases. We had Medtronic, which was running a CSOM program, where they had this little gadget, horoscope on the mobile phone. You put it in the ear, take a photograph. The eardrum's photograph goes there. ENT surgeon says, yeah, there's a perforation, bring them over. So it's about use case, it's about imagination, it's about the will. Rural India, we can really, really transform. I hope that answers the question. I can give you lots of examples.
Definitely.
Look at I was talking to somebody in the Ministry of Health, Government of India. They were saying that we have managed to bring down MMR and IMR and intermortality rate quite substantially. Now we are stuck. Why? Because we are not able to identify high-risk pregnancies.
Okay.
So how do you identify high-risk pregnancy? The clinical protocols are very clearly laid out. Now somebody has to go there, identify them so that they come, in the system. The chief medical officer can actually say, okay, I have these 10 women who have got high-risk pregnancies. And then I focus my, attention on them. Is it possible? Absolutely. So, so many, every specialty will have its use case. Every specialty will be able to provide value to the patient in the rural entry. The issue is about having the, the imagination to think beyond teleconsult.
Right. Great. We have 5 minutes to go, Dr. Shenoy, and I think we can take one more quick question related to the earlier one about rural patients itself. And this is from Urvil Shah. And he says that not only is the telemedicine a challenge in the rural areas, but he says if you look at India, it's really the people at the bottom of the pyramid, the poor and the rural or even urban, who really are not able to access healthcare. So, has telemedicine any good news for them? Is there a way in which you can deliver low-cost healthcare to these people, and not for he says profits only, but from the perspective of care? Yes.
So, to my mind, it's very simple. If you're looking at a scalable model, only the government can do that. There's no private entity which has the financial muscle to, go across India. So, what I'm saying is models can be created. They are already being done on the ground. People require just that, that three people. So, technology is not the issue. The issue is the model.
Right.
So, you have the government as one partner. You have an investor coming in from outside. And number three is the persons who will actually help you to implement it. I'm not talking about tech guys. Tech and implementation probably can happen with one entity. So three entities have to get together. I've already given you enough examples of what is possible. So you create a rural center, and it has all these things that can attach to it. So, but only thing that will be required is a net connection. Without net, there's no tele.
Yeah, in fact, one of our participants, Sunil Chiplankar, says that it works very well in the rural areas, because he's giving his own example of his father-in-law who's in a rural area, and his cardiologist is in Mangalore, and he says telemedicine has worked like a charm for him.
Absolutely.
Because I think the option is that it's not that whether telemedicine is viable, but the real question, especially in challenging time, is that it's an option between no medicine and telemedicine.
Absolutely. Very well said, sir. There's nothing there. So anything you give there is bonus.
Yeah, is absolutely something like a boon to the patients, and especially patients with who are having so many concerns and worries about their loved ones, because they are not able to go to the rural areas. Everybody is stuck wherever they are. Even inside Karnataka, I think traveling is a challenge. So I think for such people, telemedicine is definitely
it reduces costs. So the patient has to travel. Let's say even if they've traveled 200 kilometers along with two relatives, they will come to the big town, spend one day in travel,
right,
food, two people extra coming along with them, loss of wages, just for a consult and go back.
Right.
So just imagine the cost that is reduced by this.
Right. So great, Dr. Shenoy. It's been wonderful interacting with you. I'm certainly looking forward to another interaction. We will talk about it, and I want to tell all our participants, thank you for being on the live discussions. I hope that many of your questions about telemedicine have been answered. But just day after tomorrow, that's on Friday at 5 p.m. again, there's going to be a webinar where Dr. Shenoy Robinson will very clearly explain what are the dynamics of telemedicine, what are the challenges. He will even go into the legalities, what are the precautions a doctor has to take so that he doesn't end up with the. So my request to pharma friends is that ask your doctors who are your customers to avail of this opportunity. They can come on Credo Web and register, and they can actually view Friday's webinar and gain a world of knowledge. So we have limited places, so it's not like it can accommodate everybody. So first come, first serve. So do register as early as you can, along with your customer base of doctors, and I can assure you that it will be a very fruitful half-an-hour session for you, for your customers as well. So thank you, Dr. Shenoy, for being on this Digital Excellence Pharma Academy with us. I am looking forward to having a couple of more sessions with you, because I think we need this kind of interaction, because pharma is not only working in silos, but other speaker the other day mentioned that we are like pharma is like a tribal society, and very incestuous, that and that doesn't lead to a very healthy situation. So great having you, doctor. Thank you once again.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, the backend people, Kali. Thank you, all the audience. Thank you for taking time out to listen to us. Appreciate your support.